There's a little seat here on the structure on the inside of the turret, and that needs to be picked out in leather, which is Humbrol 62 in the instructions, which I always find is a nice leather colour, so quite happy to use that to do this job. We don't need to worry about thinning it, so we can just go straight in and put that on, I think, straight from the bottle. Might need a couple of coats, but sometimes you get away with one, sometimes you don't. Yeah, this is definitely going to need 2. Bit of a steady hand needed. There we go. That's our second coat done. So that's our seat done. So I'm happy with that. Yeah, that's another job in the bag. Our interior green paint is now dry, so once again, I'm going to use Tamiya brown panel line accent colour to just grubby these up a little bit and keep it in keeping with our Bombay there that we did earlier in the build. I'm not going to decant it this time because we're just liberally splashing it on a little bit. Just have to be careful of the front surfaces. But we do need to give it a full covering. And we're going to go over all the edges as well, remembering that this looks a lot heavier when it goes on than what it ends up looking like when it's done. So it lightens as it dries off is what I'm trying to say. Not very well. I think there's a little bit too much in these, so we'll take some out in a sec to use on one of the other ones. Oops, didn't want to do that. The joy of it being an enamel is it's easy to clean up. So if I go to this first one, just take any excess out that we can. And we also want to do the mount for the torpedo. I'll bring out some nice details on that. And then we're just going to go over it just to tie it all in. There we go. we have the inside of this little cowling, this sort of cover that goes over the rear turret there, and just do the inside of that where we've got this bend. Just think of it as adding shadow. We want it to be ever so slightly grimy. So that's all we need to do with that. And then finally, we want to do it on this turret mount, the interior of it. And highlight all the little details and the joints and all sorts of stuff in there. Make sure it doesn't collect and pool and start to look artificial and leave tide marks and the like. And when you're happy you've done the whole thing, we can leave that to dry, ready for putting on a little bit of dry brushing. Right, our next task is to get the guns onto the turret, and well, painting them is a bit of a problem, so we're going to have to do it in 2 stages. So what I plan to do, they're small enough to be hand painted, is to paint the back half from the ammunition drum back, then mount them on, and then paint the remaining bit. And we're hand painting these, so be relatively quick and easy. Just because there's you can't paint it and hold it. I had a look at gluing them into place, but it'd be difficult to get in with a brush, so we'll do it that way. I think will work. So I'll move that out of the way. And as it's an acrylic paint we're using, it'll be nice and quick anyway. And then I've got to paint the turret, and when you look at the instructions, you can see there is no way I can spray that, because even with masking off, paint's going to get all over the guns. It's going to go through that opening, which is quite large, and so it's not like we've got 2 little holes and the guns are fixed in the turret. The guns appear to be moving within the opening, up and down. So that means that we've got to really paint this separately. So I think my plan is to glue the 2 halves together first, and then again hand paint this, which means I don't have to mask it if I'm going to hand paint it. You could if you wanted, but I find if you're hand painting, you're much more likely to get paint seeping under the mask. So we will simply go in and hand paint it and then tidy it up with a cocktail stick afterwards, and use the trimming back method. So yeah, that's where I'm up to. So we can get the glue drying on this if we get this glued together while we're painting the guns. So let's start with that. And extra thing, quick setting is a good way forward with that. So we've just got to make sure we've got it perfectly lined up. We know that we're flat because we're on our cutting mat, which we know is perfectly flat. There we go. So even though this is an acrylic paint, there isn't really a need for us to put down an undercoat. So I'm just applying the paint straight on, and what will happen is it will be a little bit translucent on the first coat. When you go over it with a second coat, you'll get a nice solid colour. But sometimes that translucency can actually give you a nice effect and show sort of worn edges and things. So I don't mind it sometimes. So when the first coat's dried, I'll take a view on what I'm doing with the second coat. So I'll crack on and we'll get these ready to be mounted, I think. While the paint is drying on my guns here, I'm taking the opportunity to do some dry brushing on the inside of these landing gear bays. And dry brushing, it brings back the highlights of the ridges and increases the washer's ability to look like shadow. But also at this scale particularly, it can look like scratching and wear. So it's a good technique on smaller scale stuff to just give you that sort of worn look. You can use it to fade your colours a little bit and what have you. So it's worth making sure you've gone all the way around and done all your edges. Don't just go on the inside and think the job's done. Go around the edges and blend it all in and tie it all in. I think it's a good technique for improving your model quite quickly and easily. It's a very quick process. Obviously, it's not great for your brushes, so I tend to have dedicated brushes. I've got proper dry brushing brushes. But they're quite big and chunky, so they're great for things, for big areas, but for some of this smaller stuff that I want a bit more control, less so. There we go. So I've actually done these once and then I'm just going back around and double checking I'm happy. Okay, so they're ready to be installed, and I believe from glancing at the instructions, I'm going to study it more properly in a sec. You just click these into place. So I'm going to have a look at how that works in a sec. Right, okay, so that's done. Let's have a look at this method of installing these, which when I looked at the instructions, it looked very much like they just clicked in. So let's find the page. There. See, it has these little finger symbols that says push down, but they're not on the key at the front, so I don't know whether that means just click into place or not, but it suggests that that's all that you do. So it's really imperative now that we get the right ones in, otherwise we might never get them out. So let's have a look. So that should be at the back, therefore that's our sides, and then yeah, that should be right. So let's have a look. So as we turn this upside down, that should, yeah, okay. It's not dead clear to me. Let me get my stand. It's not dead clear to me what the position is. It's not, you can't see like a little location hole or anything like that. So Just lining the edge up before we push it all the way in. Oh, there we go. Wow, that's really good. That is really good. So we just push it in. I was a bit cautious because I was worried about breaking that the landing gear, but that's really cool. Let's do this one now. It feels like it shouldn't go in, to be honest. It doesn't feel natural to be pushing this down, and actually the instructions have you installing the wheel after, and I can see why now. There we go. That seems to be in place. Right, well that's nice and easy. What an ingenious way of doing it. Right, looking at painting our glass parts now, and we've got this, it's a very strange affair where we've got this gun being mounted into this glass pod that then mounted on a completely flush bit of fuselage. There's no openings or anything, so this must be some form of remotely operated gun. I'm sure someone watching this knows, but I absolutely don't. So if you want to leave in the comments how this worked, because that's fascinating to understand how that would work. But there's no paint instructions for it. However, you can see there is a big lip, and then this sort of mount at the point there. So I think those should be in the colour of the fuselage. I can't see why they wouldn't be. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to paint them in the fuselage colour. So I can always remove it if I establish it's wrong, but I don't think it is. So we're just going to put a first coat down. Now I'm going to try my best to be neat, but whilst knowing that at the same time I will have to do a bit of clean-up. My hands are not as steady as they used to be. Now I'm putting this on neat and unthinned, and you might be thinking, well, that's going to leave a load of brush marks, and you'd be absolutely right. But it doesn't matter, because the second coat that I put down will be slightly thinned, and that will even out the brush marks, and also deepen the saturation of the colour. And then we might do it again with a third coat. But by putting a thick coat on first, what you're actually doing is reducing the number of coats that you have to put on. So there you go. You can see that looks thick and chunky, and by anyone's standard, that's sort of like starting out in the hobby standard. But you know, you learn that paint is a bit of an art, and it's not really just about putting the paint on. You've got to thin your paints to get the best out of them. And I'm just trying to find, there we go, my locking tweezers, because what we're going to do is we're going to gently put the tweezer on this there, which means that I can get in and paint this. Now also, I'm not worrying too much if I get some on an area that I know should be glazed, because we can easily clean this up. And the fact that we've not put a primer on means that's easier to clean up. Primer is much harder to get off clear parts than acrylic paint, straight acrylic paint. So whilst I do prime, and you've seen me prime clear parts. When you're doing these little sort of detaily bits, quite often it's beneficial not to. Right, so there you go, that's it. Painted first coat, unthinned. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to dip my brush in this water. It's just clear water, and we can thin that down a little bit. And that's ready for a second coat in a minute or two. It's also going to stop it drying out quite so quickly. But whilst that's drying, we can start putting the first paints down on this, and we've also got some touch up to do on the nose where the mask slipped, if you remember. So let's get some other colours out and get them on. Lots of bits and pieces here that are drying. I mean, most of it is all touch dry now, but but I want to leave it to harden. So we've got one or two things we can install. We've got this gun that we can mount into there, into the side, and I've still got that to paint up, which is to go on our torpedo. And I just wanted to check the fit of the torpedo before we install this into the bomb bay. I'm not quite sure which way around it goes. I think that is the forward part of the torpedo, so that has to go in that hole there. Yeah, that fits on really well. So yeah, that looks nice. Now, the instructions sort of imply, it's a little vague, that the spinner on the torpedo should be black. That goes in there like that. Quite fancy doing it in brass or something. So I'm just going to have a look at my some references and see what I think, because they've also told me to do the blades here in gunmetal, and I think they should be brass, and I think it'd be a nice breakup of the colours. So I'm going to have a look at that. So I've done a bit of digging about, and it's difficult because most of the pictures are black and white. Certainly ICM have that as brass, but then they also have that as red. And on the black and white photographs, some of them taken of loading torpedoes on a Beaufort, it's quite clear that that is a different colour to that. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to paint that brass, and I'm also going to paint the propellers at the back brass. Now, the other suggestion, and this is really from the ICM have one of these. Like I say, they do the nose red. But the other suggestion is that this should be wood and not painted up and just be wood. And that actually makes more sense to me. So I'm sort of thinking we might do that as well, and change my mind on that. And I think all of those different colours will really add to this. So I know it's a bit of extra work, but I think Airfix have been a little bit cutting corners on the paint instructions here, so let's sort that out. So ICM do two brass colours. I'm using 1018, which is the lighter colour. The other one is, I think they call it rusty brass off the top of my head, and that's just that bit darker, and I wanted to go with a brighter one because in my mind these things were pretty much coming off the production line and then being used pretty much, so that's where so they've not really had time to age into weather and what have you, although some of the photographs you see of torpedoes being loaded up onto the aircraft look quite tatty and scratched up, so probably they're not bothering too much about the quality of the paintwork, and they're just spraying them over with whatever colour, and then it's easily getting scratched off, is how I sort of interpret that. Now I haven't thinned this is straight out of the bottle, for my first coat. We'll possibly thin it for a second coat, but I'm putting it on the little spinner first because I wanted to just see how it went down before I decided to do the blades on the propeller blades on the actual torpedo. I really like the ICM metallic paints. When they go on, they don't look brilliant, but when they dry, they look amazing. This would have been an ideal candidate for a bit of photo etch because this is really chunky compared to the actual thing. And actually, I also think they're a bit short. They should be longer, but a lot thinner. So maybe it's the thickness of them that makes them look like they're short. That's quite often the deception that you can get. Just make sure I've not missed anything. But we'll certainly benefit from a second thinner coat, I think. Well, there we go, that's the spinner on the front. I'm sure it's got a name, but I don't know what it is. So that's that done. I'm just going to unload the brush. And I'm going to get the brush wet, and I'm just using water, so you can easily thin these paints with water. So I'm just going to dry the brush off again. I've got a little bit of water there, and I'm just going to thin the paint a little bit, just so it is easier to apply on this really small area. So what I really want to do is sort of touch it with the brush, and let the paint sort of expand into where I want to go. And because we've already got a silver down, we might find that we only need the one coat. It's a little bit tricky, but it's very doable. There's quite a bit of space around the blades, so with a steady hand you can get in and paint the blades, and you're not risking contact with the rest of the torpedo. This is 10.0 short bristled brush, which just helps with that. I find that the shorter the bristles, the more control you've got. But sometimes you really want long bristles. Well, there we go. I think that's going to look a lot better when it's dried. Definitely looks a lot better. So let's have a look at thinning this down a bit more now. And we'll just go in and do a second coat on this. So all the second coat is going to do is give it a little bit more luster. It's going to even out any brush strokes, not that we've really got any, and it's just going to allow for the paint to have a more even look. So any lumpiness in the paint will get evened out with this. It's almost like a wash, it's that thin. So we can leave that to dry now. And then once that's dry, we can plop that in the front. So that's that done. Let's have a look at the wooden bit on the end. So for this job, I'm going to use light wood, which is a Mk.1 ammo MIG colour, Mk.1. I imagine this was some form of marine ply, very, very cheap to make, but strong enough to survive being dropped in the water and then zooming along. So I also imagine that, you know, it was knocked up fairly quickly and then chucked out. So I imagine that the wood colour would be fairly pale. Now, is it going to be a problem painting it onto the metallic? I'm not sure. So I'm going to have a go and see. So you've seen me put this out. I've not thinned it. We're going to put it on unthinned to start with and see how it works out. Yeah, I think it's going to cover okay. Sure we don't put it in the wrong paint. Definitely going to need at least 2, I suspect 3 coats. Was definitely worth not thinning the paint. It's going down okay. And we want a fairly solid colour for this, really. Right, I think that's about right. I've just noticed I've got rounded corners on this one and square on that one. I'm not sure if that's deliberate or what. Strange. I hadn't noticed that until now. Right, we'll let that dry and then we can come in and give it a second coat. Shouldn't take long to dry. Right, while that wood paint is drying, we can install this. So we know that this bit that's just framework that sticks out at the end goes towards the back. There is some supporting holes here for this to mount into. And it looks like they need opening up, so let me have a look at that. So we need to get our reamer out. Where's the reamer? I'm just going to open the holes up a little bit. Right, now interestingly, we're struggling with one of them, this one here, because the reamer won't go any further in, which means there's something behind it there. So I'm just going to open it out the old-fashioned way with a knife blade. The trouble with doing it with a knife blade is you don't necessarily keep your circle a perfect shape or even on centre. Right, let's try that now. There you go, that's going in. Now the eagle-eyed of you will notice that there's a leg missing off this. And I'd like to be able to tell you what's happened, but the leg has snapped off. I haven't noticed it snap off, and I wasn't aware of it snapping off, but when I picked it up a few minutes ago, there it was missing. So I'm just going to install it with it missing for now. It's one of several things that haven't gone to plan on this kit, and I think when we do the roundup we'll talk about that a little bit. So yeah, not dead impressed that I've had that problem, but anyway, let's put some glue in them holes. So I'm going to use some plastic magic. Put the glue in the hole. That means when the pin goes in, it drives the glue in rather than the glue being forced out, which is what tends to happen if you put it on the pin. Sometimes it's beneficial to put it on the pin, sometimes it's not. Sometimes I should put it in the hole and I forget and put it on the pin. You know, we're all human and all that jazz, so yeah. But today we've remembered and we're doing it properly. So that's that on. And just put a tiny amount of glue just in that joining seam of the box. There we go. So that's ready for mounting our torpedo, which is cool. And we can have a look now and see if that wood has dried enough for a second coat. Looks like it has. So yeah, that's definitely ready for a second coat, which is great. So with the second coat, I'm just going to thin it down a little bit. Now we put it on with a flat brush last time, and I'm not going to do that this time. I'm going to use a round brush. And the reason for that is I want to paint in a different direction. So last time we went in this direction, and this time I want to go that way. Right, I made a bit of a mistake earlier on in the build, not the first mistake. This build has not gone to plan, and to be honest, I've got a bit fed up of it. Not the kit is lovely, but my build experience of it, and I don't know why, just sometimes you get a bit fed up. In a previous life, before I had a channel, this would have ended up on the shelf to be finished, and perhaps never would have been, if I'm honest. But I don't know why I did this, but usually I paint the yellow first, then mask it off and paint the black afterwards. And for some daft reason, I've not done that. I can only put it down to my age. So I've got to put the yellow tips onto here, which is not ideal. So to do that, I need to measure a 2mm depth. And I know that's correct because the paint instructions tell me that. Oh, no, it's not 2mm, I beg your pardon. It's 1.4mm. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a strip of 1mm and a strip of 0.4mm and use that to space my masking on the tips. So we'll put 1.4 millimeters on the tip, put some masking tape underneath it, take the top tape off, and do it again, front and back, all on all of them. So 12 times in total, which is in itself a faff, but that's a faff that I've created for myself. So let's cut our 1 millimeter strip of tape. So I'm using this easy cutting board. These are fabulous boards, these, to be honest. So I'm taking this first one off. This one's not as a measure. That one's just to give me a perfectly straight edge. And we'll save that for later, for another project. And then we're going to cut our 1 millimeter strip now. And I like to go over it and make sure I've got it in the groove first. There we go. And then we can keep the knife in the groove. It is easy to pop out of the groove and skid over it, and that does damage the mat a little bit as well, so you do have to be careful. Right, and I'm going to cut this in half. So I've got one and I've got a backup. So that is my 1 millimeter depth mark. Where's my tweezers? There we go. So I can put that right on the end of the propeller blade. Like so. Get it straight. Yeah, you can see what a faff it is, how much easier it would have been to just mask this off. And then that's come off the back, which is handy. And then we need a 0.4 strip. So let's cut one of these out. Just really handy that I happen to have a 0.4 measure. So we put that underneath, and that should give me my correct depth. So then we need to cut off a bit of tape that we're actually going to use as the mask. So I can now shove that on underneath my other two masks, and that gives me the point that I need to be masking off. Then I can remove the other two masks. There we go. And put it on the back. Well, actually, you can use the level of the front tape for the back, so I don't need to do that, so that's good. That means that saves me some time. So I'll get those on there. Just make sure you're keeping them straight, because this one's moved a little bit. And then I can put another bit of tape on that back. What we'll do actually is we'll cut some lengths of tape and just stick them on the end of the mat there. Then I can just grab them quickly and use them as I need them. put my breakfast. I'm going to put my breakfast in that bag on there, and then it can go in that bag before it all goes in the bin.
Okay.
And the main bin needs emptying as well. With our mount for the torpedo done, we can now glue in these little side pieces that go in there. So it's 2 pieces. You need to put them in before you put the torpedo in, because the torpedo sits higher than it, and you're just not going to be able to get your finger in to get it into place. I'm just checking I've got the right one, because there is a bit of shape to the body there, so you just have to make sure you've got the right one. I'm using precision plastic glue from Deluxe for this, which is pretty much like the equivalent of Revell's contactor. But I do find that I get a lot less issues with the needle. So the Revell contactor tends to block a lot, and this, well, it's never blocked yet, and I've been using it well over a year, so very happy with it. Right, that's the first one in place, and that's sitting there nicely. So I'll get the other one in, and then we can put the torpedo on. So our torpedo has 2 holes. I have test fitted this before, so I know this fits okay. So I just got to line them up. There we go. And that's our torpedo on. But whilst I've got this upside down, this looks really good, doesn't it? I'm just going to touch up the tyres, because the bottom surface of the tyres, where when we painted them they were on the blue tack, just need touching in. So let's do that. Whilst my glue is drying and my paint is drying on the main aircraft, I can come back now to the turrets and clean up our paint job. So you've seen me do this before. If you've been following the channel for a little while, simply going in with our cocktail stick. So the basic principle is the cocktail stick is softer than the plastic, and the paint is softer than the cocktail stick, so you can gently wipe away the paint off the plastic without scratching the plastic. Now, caveat to that is, of course, you can scratch the plastic if you try really hard enough, but we're actually just gently rubbing up against the raised part of the plastic, so that eventually the paint gives way, and we can straighten it up to where the raised parts are, which is supposed to have paint on. It's a little bit time consuming, this process, but I actually find it quite therapeutic. There we go, that's crispening up, and then if we do this one here at the bottom, there we go, that's looking good now. So I'm going to carry on doing this, and then we can put the turret together. Time to mount these guns onto the turret here, and they have 2 points of contact. So I'm just putting a little bit of medium CA on both those contact points, because this is quite heavily painted. The gun is heavily painted. We're not going to be swinging on it or anything, so once it's mounted on, it should be okay. That's the first one on. That went on easier than I expected, so this one will mess around, I guess. There we go. Second one went on a bit more difficult, but it's there. That's the main thing. Right. Now we can also glue on our turret. So I'm just putting a very, very, very thin layer of CA down on the turret ring area, and I'm not putting it across the whole area. I'm just putting it, thinning it out and making sure that it's going to stick in the places where it's going to make contact. So we have this little ring here. The beauty of using CA is I don't have to clean up the plastic, and so we should be able to see the paintwork through the plastic. Right, and I'm now going to hold that in place with my fingers because that is loose, because it's that ring that sits on the inside, and then this gun bit is supposed to be loose. Then we feed the guns through the turret like so, and that's when we find it doesn't fit. There we go. Come on. I'm at that point where nothing in this build seems to be going quite as it should, and that's really annoying me at the minute. There we go, it is on. Oh, no it's not. Now it's off again. Now it's on again. Right. Let's just give that a minute to bond, and then we can look at installing it into the aircraft. Before I started filming, I thought I'd just test fit the turret so I understood what I was doing, and I'm really struggling with it. I cannot get it in. Well, that is most odd. It's about a millimetre that it's struggling by. So I'm taking the actual glazing bit off, and I'm going to fit this in and then reinstall the glazing, which is not ideal at all. So that will sit down then. Okay, but I'm not convinced I'm going to get the glazing in now, so let's have a go. Make sure that's set down as flat as it'll go. Which has broken the gun off. I am I'm ready. If I wasn't filming this, I'd be going, right, put that on the shelf and walk away. But I need to get this finished for you guys. Right, let's put this gun back on. This is the problem with using CA. It is a brittle glue, which was helpful when I wanted to take that turret back off, but not helpful when you're trying to do something fiddly that's breaking up. We might end up gluing all of this into place. Because this swings, you see. Nope, I cannot get that in. There we go. Well, that is not, oh, guns again. Broken the gun off doing that. Yeah, getting fed up of this now. So I think we're going to have to glue this into place as well, which I really didn't want to do. I can't seem to rotate the turret base. I don't know why, because it's not been glued in. So I now have guns in a position I didn't want them in. And that's brought the guns off again. That is not wanting to play ball at all. That is just not wanting to play ball. Right, so we have this collar that then goes on, like so. And that is sitting proud. I'm not even gluing that in. No, that doesn't fit either. Okay, I'm not gluing any of that in because I'm getting frustrated, and that means I'm going to break it. Let's get the propellers on, shall we? So, the propellers all painted up now. And we should be able to take our masks off. And we've got our nice yellow tips. Okay, let's get a little bit of glue on the shafts. I'm only using this CA because it happens to be out and to hand. Okay, right, one more go. See, both guns have broken off now. Well, that's more fiddly than it should be, I think. There is no need for it to be that fiddly. So we're gonna just give that a moment, so I'll come back to you in a sec. Right, last bits to go on. We have some lights to go on here. Now, there is nothing at all in the instructions about what colour these should be. I have no idea. So I'm just leaving them as they are, and we're gonna glue them in. So I'm using Ultra Glue because I'm trying to use it up. It's not a great product. I certainly won't be buying it again, but I have it to use up, so we're going to use that for installing the glaze in here. I find with MIG products they can be hit or miss. I either really like them, or I really don't. They're never really in the middle. Just managed to pull my wire out. I haven't done that for years. I'm just gonna oh, well, that doesn't appear to fit. Let's try it on that side. No, that leaves a big gap. Oh, I think it fits that one better. Right, just about to fit this second lamp. They are actually, when you look at them closely, there is differences between them. There we go. Okay. 2 to go, and then we can call it done. Right. Right, that's our lights on. So I'm calling this done, which is sooner than I wanted, but I've got to a point where there's so many things that are bothering me that I don't want to go any further with the build. So I've had problems with the fit of the table inside the front of the nose cone here. I've had problems with the fit of this glass bubble here. I've had problems, a lot of problems with the fit of the turret here, and I said right at the start of the build that this idea of adding that after the turret's gone on was an awful idea, because you have to put it on after you've painted. And to prove my point, this doesn't fit. So you've got to either do a load of sanding to make it fit, or you've got to take some of the top off and drop it down, or so it just sits proud. And you can't do that when you've painted everything. And you've got a turret installed that's been painted as well. So it's complete nonsense. When you test build this, when the designer, whoever it was, test built this, you can slot it together and it'll all fit together. But you've got to test build it when you're painting it. And I don't know whether they do that or not, but it's not the first time that I've said about a kit, and I'm not just talking about Airfix now, where I say to a kit's build instructions have not taken into account the fact that you've got to paint it. And I think that's something a number of manufacturers sort of forget about. It's not good enough just to say that this is the colour you paint it and leave the problem to the modeller. Now, I've not been able to get this turret on satisfactorily. When you push the turret glass down, it pushes down on the guns and they fall out of place. The guns stick out so far that they're getting thicker, and what happens is the opening in the turret isn't wide enough, so the guns get pushed in, and that splays out the back end, and that's why they were then dropping off, because they were losing the contact with the glue. So I don't know if that's something I've done wrong. I don't believe it is, but this whole assembly doesn't work for me. So yeah, I've struggled with that, and it's been one of those builds where if something can go wrong, it's gone wrong. Techniques that I've done many times haven't worked, and I've always worked in the past, and for some reason haven't worked this time. So there's lots of little niggles about this, and some of it is definitely my fault. Some of it I think is how the kit is engineered. I'm not unhappy with it, but it's little things like trying to put the turret in and I've taken paint off that corner. So now I've got to touch it up, and it's a never-ending trudge of issues being caused, and I've just had my fill of it now, and I'm at a walk-away point. So I'm not going to give it, I'm not going to weather this one. I'm going to say that is done. I think it's a lovely representation of the aircraft when the model is built. And with the torpedo there, it really does look nice, and I've done my best with it, but this kit fought me back a little bit, and yeah. When we do our next aircraft, we're going to do something very different, I think. But yeah, there you have it. The kit itself looks really nice. It's got some nice details. In this instance, the modeller wasn't quite up to the challenge. But yeah, in the main, I've enjoyed building it, and that's the main thing. It's just been this last little bit where it seems to be never ending, and as soon as I've had a problem I can't resolve, normally I would have put this on the shelf, walk away, maybe come back to it later on. But the reality is, when you're building for a YouTube channel, you need to get it finished, and I cannot work out how to get that to sit in the right place. You can see it's not making contact there, and I can't get that down any lower. So for me, this area here, you can see the paint's coming off now. I've tried that much. This area here doesn't work, and that means that this isn't perfect, and it's certainly not perfect enough to go on my display. So I won't be displaying this model, so I'm not going to spend any more time on it. So there you have it. That is the Airfix Beaufort done in 1/72 scale. Overall, a very nice kit, but it has some challenges, and perhaps I'm just not experienced enough at doing aircraft. I'm only in year 3 of building aircraft, and this one has definitely challenged me more than the others. I mean, my 132 Gotha was less challenging than this. So we're talking about just this area here. The rest of it was simple enough. So yeah, and actually the undercarriage gave me some problems as well. The sequence of building it and how it comes together. So yeah, my gut feel is there's some issues with the design of it, and it could have been designed better. The turret, for example, if they designed that as an L-shaped piece and you could just slot the turret in from the back, you could paint all that up, slot the turret in and mount it on. But you know, that idea is daft. Anyway, there you have it. That's my view of the kit. I hope you enjoyed the builds. You can go away and have a giggle at the fact that I've struggled with it, and I will see you very soon. You enjoy your modelling. Bye for now. Hi, and thanks for watching. You can support the channel by hitting the like button, and if you haven't subscribed, please consider the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you don't miss any content that I put out. Model Kit Stuff is a self-funded channel, and I don't do membership or Patreon or buy me a coffee. So if you'd like to further donate to the channel and ensure the cameras keep rolling and the content keeps coming, then you can consider making a donation through my PayPal. You'll find a link to that in the text below. You enjoy your modelling, and I'll see you soon.